She moved quietly through the halls of the mansion, carrying a small tray of fresh flowers. Her hands were careful, her steps measured, as if she were aware of every sound she made. The house was enormous, with high ceilings, polished wooden floors, and walls covered in framed paintings that seemed to watch over her as she went about her work. Despite the grandeur, she felt invisible here, a shadow in a world of celebrations and formal gatherings. Every day was much the same. She would start before the sun rose, dusting the furniture, straightening the rooms, and making sure that everything was in its place. The smell of polished wood and fresh linens filled the air, and she moved among it all with a quiet efficiency. The staff all knew her as the girl who could handle anything without complaint, who never drew attention to herself. Guests saw her sometimes, a fleeting figure in the background, and smiled politely, but no one stopped to talk or notice her story. She had always been like this, someone who worked hard and kept to herself. It wasn't that she wanted to be unnoticed, but life had taught her that her voice wasn't always heard. Still, she carried a little spark inside her, something she kept hidden from the world. She hummed softly when she worked, the sound of music threading through the silence of the empty halls. It was just a small melody, something she had made up herself, but it made her feel alive in a place that could feel cold and distant. Some of the other staff knew she had a gift, though they didn't talk about it much. Occasionally, she would practice in the small storage room where an old piano stood, covered in dust and forgotten over the years. Her fingers would touch the keys lightly at first, testing the notes, and then she would let the music flow. It wasn't about anyone else. It was for herself, a secret world where she could be free and expressive, where the weight of daily chores could fall away. Even as she worked, she sometimes imagined other places, other lives. She pictured herself on a stage, the soft glow of lights warming her face, the audience holding their breath as she played. It felt like a dream, one she wasn't sure she was allowed to have. The mansion was her world, and in it her place was clear. She swept the floors, polished the silver, and kept everything in order, while the people who lived here or visited rarely gave her a second thought. The mansion was preparing for a wedding that week, and the air was thick with anticipation. Flowers were arriving in carts, ribbons and fabrics were being hung in the grand hall, and the staff scurried to make sure everything was perfect. She moved among them, unseen but indispensable, arranging chairs, adjusting table settings, and making sure that the candles were placed just so. The wedding would be magnificent, full of laughter, music, and celebrations. And she would be there, quietly ensuring that the day went off without a hitch, as she had done for many events before. In her pocket, she carried a small photograph, a reminder of her true passion. It was a picture of her first piano, the one she had learned to play on as a child. She touched it briefly, her fingers brushing over the edges, feeling a warmth in her chest. She remembered the hours she had spent practicing, the notes that had danced under her fingers, the songs she had created in the privacy of her room. That piano had been her friend, her confidant, and a place where the world's noise could not reach her. Sometimes, she would sneak a look at the grand piano in the mansion's music room. It was beautiful, its black surface gleaming, its keys polished and inviting, but it was always in use for rehearsals, for professional musicians who were hired to entertain the guests. She never imagined she could play in front of anyone here, let alone at the wedding that everyone was preparing for. It was a dream that felt too far away, a secret that she kept to herself. The day before the wedding, the mansion was buzzing more than usual. Deliveries were coming in constantly, flowers being arranged, tables being decorated, and the staff running from room to room. She moved with them, carrying a tray of glasses, wiping surfaces, and making sure that nothing was out of place. Her hands were tired, and her back ached, but she barely noticed. She was used to long hours, to being the invisible force that kept everything running smoothly. During a brief moment of quiet, she found herself in the music room again. She looked at the piano, her fingers itching to touch the keys. No one was around, and she allowed herself a small indulgence. She pressed a note gently, listening to the sound resonate through the room. It was soft at first, a single note, But then she let her hands move more freely, playing a melody that she had been working on for weeks. The music filled the empty room, wrapping around her like a warm blanket, giving her a sense of peace and belonging. A fellow staff member peeked in, surprised. "I didn't know you could play like that," they whispered. She smiled faintly, embarrassed but pleased. "It's just a little something I do," she said quietly, and returned to her work. The staff member nodded, but the secret stayed between them. In this mansion, talents were often hidden behind aprons and cleaning cloths, unnoticed by the world beyond. That evening, as the mansion settled into a quieter rhythm, she prepared herself for the big day ahead. She arranged her own modest belongings, making sure her uniform was neat and presentable. She thought about the guests who would arrive, the laughter and music that would fill the halls, and she felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. It was just another event for her to manage, but somewhere deep inside, a small hope began to stir. She went to bed early, knowing that the next day would be long and exhausting. As she lay under the thin sheets, she closed her eyes and let her mind wander. She imagined herself playing the piano, the notes floating through the air, the people stopping to listen. It was a quiet dream, delicate and fragile, but it made her heart beat faster. She knew that tomorrow, she would be invisible again, doing her duties and ensuring that everything went perfectly. Yet in the back of her mind, a tiny spark of possibility glimmered, a hope that perhaps, just perhaps, someone might see her for who she really was. The next morning, the mansion was alive with activity. The sun had barely risen, but the staff were already moving through the rooms with trays, flowers, and decorations. Every corner of the mansion seemed to pulse with energy, as if it knew the day held something special. She moved quietly through the halls, carrying a basket of linens, her eyes alert to every detail. Even though she had worked in this house for years, the wedding brought a different kind of tension, a sense that everything had to be perfect. Guests would start arriving soon, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh flowers, polished wood, and the faint perfume of the staff who had been working tirelessly. She passed the kitchen, where chefs were busy preparing delicate dishes, the clatter of pots and pans creating a rhythm that almost felt like music. But she had no time to linger. She had her own duties, each one important, even if no one noticed her doing them. The grand hall was being decorated, tables arranged with crisp linens and sparkling glasses. She adjusted the chairs, straightened the tablecloths, and smoothed the folds of napkins. The flowers were set carefully in their vases, each one placed just right. Her eyes caught every small imperfection and corrected it quietly, leaving no trace that anyone had been there at all. She knew that weddings like this were remembered for the smallest details, and she made sure every detail was flawless. As the day went on, the mansion became busier. Guests arrived, dressed in bright colors and elegant fabrics, laughter and greetings echoing through the halls. She passed by groups of people she had never met, their voices warm and excited, and she moved like a shadow among them. No one gave her more than a passing glance, and she liked it that way. It allowed her to observe, to notice things that others overlooked, without drawing attention to herself. Amidst the preparations, she kept her small secret close. In the quiet moments between tasks, she thought of the piano and the melodies she loved to play. She pictured herself sitting at the keys, the music flowing through her fingers, the room filled with the sound of her soul. It was a comfort, a reminder that there was more to her than what anyone saw. She held that dream carefully, as though it were fragile glass, because the world had never given her a reason to believe she could share it openly. The wedding planners and musicians moved through the mansion, discussing schedules and performances. She listened quietly, noticing the tension in their voices as they tried to coordinate every moment. One of the musicians practiced a piece on a small keyboard in a corner, but the sound was shallow compared to what she imagined she could do. She shook her head slightly and returned to her work, but the desire to play, to express herself, hummed softly inside her, a quiet insistence she could not ignore. At one point, a small problem arose. One of the flower arrangements had been knocked over, petals scattered across the floor. She hurried over, kneeling down to pick them up, her hands gentle as she rearranged each bloom. A guest passed by, smiling at her briefly, but she did not look up. She did not need recognition. Her satisfaction came from knowing that things were right, that the mansion would shine for the wedding. By midday, the wedding hall was almost ready. The chairs were lined perfectly, the tables gleamed, and the flowers created a tapestry of color and fragrance. She stood back for a moment, surveying her work with quiet pride. No one here knew her name or acknowledged her effort, but in her heart, she felt the satisfaction of creating something beautiful. She had always believed that the unseen work mattered, even if the world overlooked it. During a brief lull, she wandered near the music room. The door was slightly ajar, and the grand piano gleamed in the sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. She paused, feeling a pull toward it that was almost magnetic. Her fingers itched to touch the keys, to bring the music to life, but she knew it was not her place. The professional musicians were scheduled to perform, and she was just a maid. She sighed softly and turned away, returning to the endless tasks that demanded her attention. The guests began to settle, and the air filled with murmurs of excitement and anticipation. She moved through the hall, making sure that no tablecloth was crooked, that no chair was out of line, and that the smallest details were perfect. She adjusted glasses and silverware with precision, her mind focused on the work even as her heart longed for the piano. She had always known that her life was not about recognition, but there was a quiet ache inside her for a chance to show the world who she truly was. As the afternoon wore on, a sudden change occurred. The musicians who were supposed to perform had run into a problem, and there was uncertainty in the air. The wedding planners whispered to one another, their faces showing concern. She overheard bits of conversation, realizing that the music, the heartbeat of the celebration, was in jeopardy. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt a surge of something she had not felt in years. Hope. She hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. The thought was reckless, almost impossible, but she could not shake it. She could play the piano. She knew the songs, the melodies, the rhythms that could fill the room. Her fingers had danced on keys for years in private, and now, perhaps, there was a moment when she could step beyond the shadows. She felt the old thrill of anticipation, the pulse of possibility that had always stayed tucked away in the corners of her mind. A junior staff member noticed her pause. "Are you okay?" they asked softly, seeing her gaze fixed on the music room. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips, but she did not speak. The thought of revealing her secret talent was terrifying, but the need to play, to give life to the music, outweighed her fear. She could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of the guests, and it called to her like a whisper she could no longer ignore. She made her way to the music room, her steps careful but determined. The grand piano stood there, waiting, its black surface gleaming, keys pristine and inviting. She placed her hands lightly on the keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath her fingers. Her heart raced as she prepared to play, the sound of the mansion fading into the background, leaving only the music and her. It was a private moment in the middle of chaos, a chance to step into the light and share the gift she had kept hidden for so long. Outside the room, the staff moved restlessly, trying to manage the preparations. The guests were beginning to gather, their chatter and laughter filling the halls. She closed her eyes briefly, drawing in a deep breath, and then pressed the first key. The note rang out clear and strong, a signal that something extraordinary was about to happen. She let her fingers move, flowing over the keys, creating a melody that rose and fell like waves. Each note carried her emotions, her history, her longing, and her joy. The music began to draw attention. Guests who had been chatting paused, their eyes turning toward the sound. Staff members exchanged surprised glances, whispering in disbelief. The melody was beautiful, complex, and heartfelt, far beyond anything anyone expected from a maid in the background. She played with abandon, lost in the music, feeling the rhythm of her life pour out through her fingers. It was as if the piano had always been waiting for this moment, and she had finally found her voice. As she played, a hush fell over the room. The chatter faded, the laughter softened, and all eyes were drawn to the music. She looked up briefly, startled by the astonished faces, but then returned to the piano, letting the notes guide her. The mansion seemed to hold its breath, captivated by the beauty that had emerged from someone who had been invisible for so long. It was a moment of magic, a transformation that left everyone in awe, proving that talent and heart could be found in the most unexpected places. The grand hall was filled with people, all talking and laughing, their excitement buzzing through the air. She stood near the side, holding a tray of drinks, watching the guests interact with one another. Her eyes drifted constantly to the music room, where the grand piano sat, untouched and waiting. She could feel it calling to her, a soft pull she could not resist, but she hesitated. She was just a maid here, and no one expected anything from her. The thought of stepping forward filled her with both fear and exhilaration. Suddenly, a commotion near the stage caught her attention. The lead musician, who was supposed to perform first, had a problem with his instrument. He tried to adjust it, but it was clear he could not play. The wedding planner hurried over, panic evident in her voice, speaking rapidly into a phone. The guests were beginning to notice the delay, some looking around in confusion. She felt a surge of opportunity mixed with anxiety. Could this be the moment she had imagined countless times? A junior staff member whispered to her, glancing at the piano, then back at her. Maybe you could try? They said it almost as a joke, their eyes wide with uncertainty. She looked down at the tray in her hands, then back at the piano, her heart pounding. It was reckless to think she could do it, to stand before all these people and play. But the music inside her was insistent, a voice that had been waiting for years to be heard. For a moment, she froze, unsure if she could step into a world that had never seemed meant for her. The hall was busy, filled with chatter, laughter, and the sounds of preparation. But the thought of the piano, the way the keys felt under her fingers, and the melodies that danced in her mind gave her courage. She nodded slightly to the staff member, who smiled and moved away to let her pass. As she approached the music room, she felt every step echo in her chest. The room was warm from the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, the polished floor reflecting the glow. She reached the piano and rested her hands gently on the keys, feeling the familiar texture, the smoothness beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing a deep breath, imagining the music flowing through her, connecting her to the room and everyone in it. Outside, the guests were beginning to murmur, noticing the absence of music. The wedding planner was speaking quickly, trying to find a solution, but the chaos only highlighted the urgency. A hush began to fall as curiosity grew. Who could possibly fill the silence in a way that would match the beauty of this day? With a quiet determination, she pressed the first note. The sound was clear and bright, filling the room with a single perfect tone. She let her fingers move naturally, finding the rhythm and melody she had practiced countless times in secret. The notes flowed effortlessly, weaving through the air, creating a tapestry of sound that captured the attention of everyone present. It was as if the piano had been waiting for her, and now it was singing with her soul. The guests paused mid-conversation, their eyes drawn to the music room. The chatter faded as the melody took hold, rising and falling in gentle waves. She played with all the emotion she had kept hidden for years, letting the music express her story, her hopes, and her dreams. Each note carried her heart, and the audience felt it, even though they did not yet know who was playing. Some of the staff entered quietly, drawn by the sound. They watched in awe as the maid, who had always been invisible, became the center of attention. Her fingers danced across the keys, her expression focused yet serene. The complexity of the music surprised everyone. It was not the simple melodies they had expected. It was rich, full of feeling, and breathtakingly beautiful. The hall seemed to hold its breath, captivated by the unexpected performance. Guests slowly moved closer to the music room, curiosity turning into admiration. Whispers spread through the crowd, voices low with astonishment. "Who is that?" some asked. "She's amazing," said others. The sound of the piano filled every corner of the mansion, creating a magical atmosphere that seemed to suspend time itself. The maid, who had always worked in the shadows, was now the center of a moment that no one would forget. As she played, her nervousness began to fade, replaced by a sense of joy and freedom. She realized that the music was not just for the guests or the wedding. It was for her, for the part of her that had waited patiently for this opportunity. Her fingers moved with confidence, expressing emotions that words could not capture. The music spoke for her, telling a story of hidden talent, perseverance, and the quiet strength of someone who had always been underestimated. The wedding planner and other staff watched in amazement. They had expected a moment of panic or disappointment, but instead, they witnessed a miracle. The maid had transformed the moment, turning a potential crisis into an unforgettable experience. Even the musicians who had arrived late stopped in their tracks, listening with wide eyes as she continued to play. The bride and groom, who had been greeting guests in another room, were drawn by the sound. They followed the music, curious and intrigued. When they saw her, their faces lit up with surprise. They had never imagined that someone from the staff could create such a powerful and moving performance. Their eyes met hers, and she felt a brief flicker of connection, a silent acknowledgement that they understood the gift she was sharing. The music filled the room with warmth and elegance, each note a testament to years of quiet dedication. She played without pause, feeling the rhythm in her body, letting the emotions guide her hands. The melody rose and fell like a wave, captivating everyone who heard it. The audience was spellbound, unable to look away, unable to speak, lost in the beauty of the music that seemed to come from another world. As the performance continued, she noticed small gestures of admiration around her. Guests held their breath, eyes shining with wonder. Some discreetly took out their phones to capture the moment, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The mansion itself seemed to respond, the light reflecting off the polished surfaces, enhancing the ethereal quality of the music. It was a perfect harmony of talent, opportunity, and emotion. When she finally reached the last note, the room remained silent for a heartbeat. Then, as if on cue, the crowd erupted in applause, cheers, and exclamations of astonishment. People were on their feet, clapping and praising, some with tears in their eyes. The bride and groom rushed forward, their faces radiant with gratitude and amazement. She had turned a moment of potential chaos into an unforgettable memory, leaving everyone in awe of her skill and courage. The maid, still standing by the piano, felt a wave of relief and joy wash over her. She had stepped out of the shadows and allowed her music to speak, and the response was overwhelming. She smiled softly, her heart full, realizing that she had finally been seen for who she truly was. The guests, staff, and even the musicians recognized her talent, and for the first time, she felt a sense of belonging that went beyond her duties. The wedding continued with a new energy, the music she had played setting the tone for the day. Conversations were filled with admiration for her performance, and the atmosphere was richer, more vibrant, and alive with emotion. She returned to her duties later, but the shadow she had always occupied had disappeared. She had left her mark, not as a maid, but as a musician whose music touched everyone present, creating a story that would be remembered for years to come. The music flowed from her hands like a river, filling every corner of the mansion with warmth, emotion, and beauty. She sat at the grand piano, her back straight but her body relaxed, letting the rhythm guide her. Each note carried the story of her life, the years of quiet work, the long hours spent hidden behind cleaning cloths and trays, the dreams she had nurtured in private. She played as though the music itself was a friend she had been waiting to embrace for a lifetime. The guests were mesmerized. Conversations stopped, laughter faded, and all eyes turned to the source of the melody. Some leaned forward in their chairs, unable to believe that such talent could come from someone they had overlooked, someone who had always been part of the background. Their expressions were a mix of shock, admiration, and awe. People whispered to each other, voices low with disbelief. "Who is she? I had no idea she could play like this. It's incredible." Even the staff who had worked alongside her for years felt a sense of wonder. They had always known she was capable, had caught glimpses of her talent when she practiced in the empty music room. But seeing it now, in front of so many, was breathtaking. Some held their breath as her fingers moved effortlessly over the keys, creating a melody that was both delicate and powerful, intimate yet grand. It was a performance that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the ordinary, touching hearts and stirring emotions. The bride and groom arrived just in time to see her at the piano. Their eyes widened in astonishment, and they exchanged glances, speechless. They had not expected anything like this, certainly not from a maid who had spent her days moving quietly through the mansion, unnoticed. But here she was, commanding the room with music that spoke directly to the soul. They felt tears prickling their eyes as they watched, realizing that this moment was going to be one of the most memorable parts of their wedding. She had begun with gentle notes, simple melodies that slowly built into a richer, more intricate composition. Her fingers danced across the keys, weaving together harmonies and rhythms that seemed impossible for someone who had never performed publicly. The notes rose and fell, ebbing and flowing like waves, carrying the listeners along a journey of beauty and emotion. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling as though it was speaking directly to their hearts. Time seemed to slow down as she played. The sounds of clinking glasses, laughter, and conversation faded completely, replaced by the enchanting voice of the piano. The room was alive with her music, and it seemed to fill even the empty corners of the mansion with light and warmth. Her nerves had melted away, replaced by a sense of connection to something larger than herself. The piano was no longer an instrument. It was an extension of her heart, a bridge between her world and the world around her. Guests began to whisper excitedly among themselves, sharing their amazement and admiration. "I've never heard anything like this," one said, her voice trembling slightly. "She should be playing in concert halls, not just for weddings," another added. Children peeked from behind chairs, their eyes wide with wonder, as if witnessing magic in the making. Even the musicians who had arrived late paused to watch, nodding in respect and disbelief. It was a performance that transcended expectation, a reminder that talent and passion often reside where we least expect it. The maid, lost in the music, barely noticed the attention. She was focused entirely on the melody, the flow of notes, the emotions that surged through her with each chord. Her hands moved with precision and grace, each motion deliberate but effortless. She could feel the energy of the audience, the way their astonishment fed into her playing, encouraging her to pour more of herself into the music. For the first time, she felt completely seen, not for her work as a maid, but for who she truly was. As the piece reached its climax, the music swelled, filling the grand hall with an intensity that made the room vibrate. The audience was captivated, leaning forward in their seats, eyes shining with awe. She played with every ounce of emotion she had ever felt, every hope and every quiet longing. The final notes lingered in the air, delicate and powerful, as though the mansion itself was holding its breath. When the last key was pressed, there was a moment of complete silence, a pause that felt almost sacred. Then the applause began, gentle at first, then growing louder, filling the room with a thunderous roar of appreciation. Guests rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some with tears streaming down their faces. The bride and groom rushed forward, their faces radiant with gratitude and amazement. They embraced her warmly, thanking her for turning their wedding into a moment that would be remembered forever. The maid smiled shyly, her heart full, knowing that she had given more than just a performance. She had shared a piece of her soul. People continued to speak to her throughout the evening, praising her talent, expressing their surprise and admiration. Some asked if she had performed publicly before, others asked if she had ever considered a career as a musician. She shook her head, smiling softly, explaining that music had always been a private joy, something she had nurtured quietly while performing her daily duties. Yet now, surrounded by applause and appreciation, she felt a warmth and recognition she had never known. The staff watched with quiet pride, knowing that she had turned an ordinary day into something extraordinary. They had seen her dedication and her hidden talent, but witnessing her bring the room to life with her music was unforgettable. Even the wedding planner, who had initially worried about the missing performer, approached her with tears in her eyes, thanking her for saving the day and elevating the celebration in ways no one could have imagined. For the rest of the evening, the mansion was alive with the memory of her music. Guests spoke of it in excited tones, sharing stories of how the maid had amazed everyone with her talent. The music she had played continued to echo in their minds, a reminder that beauty and excellence can come from the most unexpected places. She returned to her duties later, quietly helping with refreshments and tidying up, but something inside her had changed. She was no longer just a maid moving through the background. She was someone who had shared her gift and had been seen, appreciated, and celebrated for it. That night, as the guests departed and the mansion settled into silence, she allowed herself a moment to sit at the piano once more. She played softly, not for anyone else, but for herself, savoring the feeling of the keys beneath her fingers and the music that had flowed from her heart. She reflected on the day, on the astonishment and joy she had witnessed on the faces of the guests, and on the way her life had subtly shifted. For the first time, she felt that her talent, her passion, and her story mattered to the world beyond her quiet routines. She knew that this was only the beginning of something new. The performance had opened doors, not just to recognition, but to the realization that her dreams were valid and achievable. It had reminded her that talent and heart are often found in unexpected places, and that courage, even in small doses, can lead to extraordinary moments. As she played into the quiet night, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had finally stepped into the light and shared her music with the world. The wedding continued with an energy that seemed brighter, lighter, and more joyful than it ever had before. Guests spoke in animated tones about the unexpected performance, their faces lighting up as they described the moment the maid had transformed the hall with her music. She moved quietly through the crowd, making sure glasses were refilled, tables were tidy, and guests were comfortable. Yet everywhere she went, people looked at her differently now. The shadow that had followed her for years was gone, replaced by a quiet respect and genuine admiration. Throughout the evening, guests approached her, expressing their amazement and curiosity. Some had tears in their eyes as they spoke, their voices trembling with emotion. They praised her skill, asking how long she had been playing and whether she had ever performed in public before. She smiled softly, answering modestly, explaining that music had always been a private part of her life, a joy she had nurtured while working tirelessly behind the scenes. The acknowledgement and gratitude were overwhelming, a stark contrast to the invisibility she had grown used to. The bride and groom made a special point to thank her personally. They took her hands in theirs, looking into her eyes with warmth and sincerity. "You made our day unforgettable," they said. "We will never forget what you did. You turned a challenge into something magical." She felt her heart swell, a mixture of pride, humility, and happiness. For the first time, she realized that her talent had the power to create joy and leave a lasting impression on the lives of others. Other staff members quietly watched, smiling and shaking their heads in admiration. They had always known she was talented, but seeing her perform in front of so many, receiving recognition and applause, was inspiring. Some whispered to each other about how she deserved more opportunities, more chances to let the world see what she could do. Even those who had not paid much attention to her before now regarded her with newfound respect and awe. As the night went on, guests continued to linger near her, sharing compliments and expressing how moved they had been by her music. Children who had been enchanted by the performance earlier approached her, shyly asking her to play again. She obliged, pressing a few gentle notes, letting them experience the magic she had created. Their faces lit up with wonder, and their laughter filled the room, blending with the memories of the melodies she had played earlier. It was a simple moment, yet it carried the weight of years spent in obscurity finally being recognized. The mansion itself seemed to hum with satisfaction, as if it too acknowledged the significance of the day. Staff moved more confidently, inspired by what they had witnessed. Conversations were now infused with stories of her talent and the astonishment of the audience. It was clear that this was not just a moment of individual brilliance. It had created a ripple effect, touching everyone present, changing their perception of what was possible. Her music had transformed not only the wedding but also the way people saw her and, by extension, the possibilities that lay hidden in everyday life. In the following days, the story began to spread beyond the mansion. Guests shared their experience on social media, praising the maid whose piano playing had captivated everyone. Messages of admiration and curiosity flooded in, with people expressing their amazement and wondering if she would perform publicly again. Even local media picked up the story, intrigued by the tale of a hidden talent emerging in such an unexpected setting. She remained humble in the attention, but inside, a sense of pride and possibility began to grow. The world had finally seen a glimpse of her true self. Opportunities started to present themselves. Invitations arrived for her to play at private events, community gatherings, and even local concerts. People offered guidance, encouragement, and the possibility of furthering her musical journey. She considered these offers carefully, aware that this was a chance to explore a world she had always only dreamed of. The fear of stepping into the public eye was still present, but it was now balanced with excitement and determination. For the first time, she felt that her passion for music could become more than a private joy. It could be a source of connection and fulfillment. Her life began to shift in small, meaningful ways. The mansion continued to require her attention for daily duties, but now, she was seen not only as a hard-working maid, but also as a remarkable musician. Staff and guests alike treated her with a new level of respect, acknowledging both her dedication and her talent. Simple interactions, which had once gone unnoticed, were now filled with warmth, recognition, and curiosity. She felt lighter, as though the weight of invisibility had finally been lifted, replaced by the possibility of being truly seen. In the quiet moments between tasks, she returned to the piano, allowing herself to play freely without fear or expectation. Each note was a reminder of what she was capable of and of the power of embracing one's talents, no matter how long they had been hidden. Music had always been a part of her life, but now it was no longer a secret. It was a bridge between her inner world and the lives of others, a gift that could bring joy, inspire wonder, and create lasting memories. She reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The years of unnoticed work, the quiet dedication, the private practice sessions in an empty room, and the courage it took to finally step forward. It was a reminder that hidden talents exist in unexpected places, and that moments of recognition can arrive when least expected. Her story became a lesson in patience, perseverance, and the value of believing in oneself, even when the world seems indifferent. As time passed, she continued to balance her responsibilities at the mansion with her growing musical opportunities. Each performance reinforced the idea that her gifts mattered, not just to her but to those who experienced them. She was invited to play for weddings, community events, and local gatherings, each occasion allowing her to share the beauty she had cultivated for so long. The admiration she received was not about fame or status, but about the joy and inspiration her music brought to others. She discovered that recognition and respect, when earned through dedication and passion, were profoundly fulfilling. Her story inspired those around her. Staff members were reminded to nurture their own hidden talents. Guests were reminded that extraordinary gifts can exist in ordinary places, and community members were reminded of the importance of seeing and appreciating people for who they truly are. The maid who had once been invisible became a symbol of quiet strength, patience, and the transformative power of sharing one's gifts. Her journey was a testament to the idea that opportunity and courage, when combined, can lead to moments of magic. In the quiet of her own room that evening, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She sat by the window, looking out at the fading light, and thought about how much had changed. The applause, the recognition, and the invitations had not altered who she was at her core, but they had affirmed her belief in herself and her abilities. The piano, which had always been a sanctuary, had now become a bridge to a future filled with possibility and connection. She realized that her life had shifted not because of luck, but because of a combination of dedication, talent, and courage. The years of work, the private practice sessions, the patience, and the quiet resilience had all led to this point. She had stepped forward when opportunity knocked and embraced her moment, transforming it into something unforgettable. The experience reminded her that everyone has hidden depths and that the world often overlooks them, waiting for courage and chance to reveal the brilliance within. As she lay down to sleep that night, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Her story had been written in the silent hours of effort and practice, and now it was being shared with the world. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition were not merely accolades. They were affirmations that the path she had walked, unseen and steady, had meaning and impact. She had finally been seen, heard, and celebrated, and the world had changed, just as she had.